The scent of pine resin and damp earth was thick in the crisp mountain air as we finally cleared the last switchback. Below us, the valley unfolded like a rumpled green quilt, but our destination was the high meadow nestled just below the snow-dusted peaks. Whisper Pines Campground. My friends Maya, Ben, Liam, and I had been planning this escape for months. 4 days of pristine wilderness, crackling campfires, stargazing untainted by city lights, and trails leading to breathtaking vistas. It felt like paradise found. We found the perfect spot, a flat clearing carpeted in soft moss, bordered by ancient firs and a chuckling stream. Setting up camp was a symphony of laughter, the thud of tent stakes, and the satisfying hiss of inflating sleeping bags. Ben, ever the Eagle Scout, built a fire pit with practiced ease. Maya strung fairy lights between the trees. Liam cracked open celebratory beers. I breathed deep, the stress of deadlines and traffic melting away. This was the reset we desperately needed. The first day was idyllic. We hiked a nearby ridge, rewarded with panoramic views that stole our breath. We swam in the icy, crystal-clear lake fed by glacial runoff, shrieking like kids. Dinner was grilled sausages and foil-wrapped potatoes in the coals, tasted 10 times. Better outdoors. As dusk painted the sky in fiery oranges and purples, we gathered around the roaring fire, swapping stories, the crackle, and pop our only competition. The stars emerged, a dazzling, impossible multitude. We pointed out constellations, feeling wonderfully small, beneath the vast dome of the night dot. It was late. The fire reduced to glowing embers, when the first sound broke the peace. Not an owl, not the wind. A low, guttural chittering, like stones, rapidly grinding together, echoed from the dense tree line just beyond the reach of our firelight. It stopped abruptly. We froze, beers halfway to lips, laughter dying on our tongues. Bear? Ben whispered, his hand instinctively reaching for the bear spray clipped to his belt. Didn't sound like any bear I've heard, Liam murmured, his eyes scanning the black wall of trees. Two ... mechanical? Maya shivered, pulling her fleece tighter. Maybe just a weird bird? I strained my ears, hearing only the normal night sounds, the stream, the sighing wind in the pines. Probably nothing, just the forest settling. But a prickle of unease ran down my spine. The sound had felt wrong, alien. We joked nervously, trying to dismiss it, but the easy camaraderie was fractured. We banked the fire higher and retreated to our tents earlier than planned. The mountain night suddenly felt less welcoming, more. Watchful sleep was elusive. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig outside the tent fabric jerked me awake, heart pounding. Maya, sharing my tent, was equally tense. Then, around 2 a.m., it happened. A blood-curdling screech ripped through the silence, unlike any animal cry I knew, high-pitched, metallic, and filled with a rage that vibrated in my bones. It was followed by a cacophony of that same chittering, multiplied a dozen times over, coming from multiple directions surrounding the camp. Get up! Get up now!" Ben roared from his tent. We scrambled out, fumbling with zippers in the near-total darkness. Ben had a powerful flashlight, its beam cutting, a shaky swath through the black. It swept across the tree line and caught movement shadows detaching from deeper shadows. Things low to the ground, scuttling with unnatural speed. They were man-sized, but moved on all fours like spiders, limbs impossibly long and jointed. Light reflected off smooth, segmented carapaces that seemed to drink the beam rather than shine. No discernible faces, just dark indentations where eyes might be, and glimpses of sharp, chitinous protrusions. "WH, are those?" Maya screamed, pure terror in her voice. They didn't attack immediately. They circled just beyond the light's edge, a nightmarish pack, their chittering a constant, unnerving soundtrack. One darted forward, a blur of dark chitin, and swiped at Liam's tent. The rip of nylon was horrifyingly loud. Liam stumbled back, falling over a log. The fire! Get to the fire! Ben yelled, brandishing the flashlight like a weapon and spraying bear spray in a wide arc. The chemical mist hit one of the creatures as it lunged. It recoiled with a hissing shriek, rubbing at its head section furiously. It bought us seconds. We huddled near the dying embers, backs to the fire pit. The creatures pressed closer, emboldened. I saw details in the flickering glow, claws like obsidian shards, bodies that seemed to shift and ripple under their dark shells. They moved with a terrifying, silent coordination. This wasn't random predation. This felt like hunting. "We can't stay," I gasped. "They'll rush us." "Where?" Liam cried, scrambling to his feet, clutching a tent pole like a club. "The trail." Ben pointed his light towards the main path leading back down the mountain. "Head for the ranger station." "Go, now." He sprayed another burst of bear spray, creating a temporary cloud. We didn't hesitate. We ran, abandoning everything, tents, packs, supplies. We plunged into the inky blackness of the forest trail, Ben sweeping the light frantically. Behind us, the chittering rose to a frenzied pitch, and the sounds of pursuit began. The rapid, skittering scramble of many limbs over rock and root, horrifyingly close. We ran blindly, tripping over roots, branches whipping our faces. Fear was alive, wire in our veins. Behind us, the sounds grew louder. A guttural snarl, terrifyingly close, made Maya stumble. I grabbed her arm, hauling her forward. Liam screamed. A creature had lunged from the side, raking claws across his backpack, shredding it. Ben whirled, spraying wildly. The creature shrieked and fell back, but others flowed around it. We were being herded, driven deeper into the mountains, away from the escape road. We burst out of the trees into a small, moonlit clearing. Panting, we saw it. A dilapidated log cabin, half collapsed, nestled against a sheer rock face. A desperate hope flared. "In there," Ben gasped. "Barricade the door." We sprinted for the cabin, the creatures mere yards behind. Their chittering a deafening wave of we slammed through the rotten wooden door of the cabin, Ben and Liam shoving. A heavy, rusted iron stove against it immediately after. Maya and I frantically searched for anything else to block it, finding only broken furniture and decades of dust. Outside, the creatures hit the door with terrifying force. Wood splintered. Claws scrabbled against the planks, seeking purchase. The chittering was a maddening wall of sound, vibrating through the flimsy walls. "They'll get in," Maya sobbed, pressing her back against the far wall, her eyes wide with terror. "Look!" Liam pointed his fading headlamp beam upwards. A rickety ladder led to a loft. "Up! Get up!" We scrambled up the ladder, just as the door gave way with a final explosive crack. The creatures poured into the cabin below, a seething mass of dark, angular limbs and glistening carapaces. They moved with unnerving silence now, except for the constant, low chitter. They sniffed the air, probing the corners with their clawed limbs. Searching Dot, we huddled in the loft, barely breathing, peering through gaps in the rough-hewn floorboards. The moonlight filtering through broken roof shingles illuminated the scene below in stark, terrifying relief. The creatures weren't animals. Their movements were too coordinated, too purposeful. They seemed to communicate with subtle shifts in posture and faint, almost subsonic hums beneath the chittering. They examined our discarded water bottle, sniffed. Liam's torn backpack with disturbing curiosity. One stood near the center, slightly larger, its carapace bearing faint, spiraling etchings that seemed to writhe in the dim light. It tilted its head section, emitting a series of rapid clicks. The others froze, listening. A single quote's read ... Intelligent. Ben breathed, his voice barely audible. Look at them. Suddenly, the lead creature snapped its head towards the far wall of the cabin, where the rock face met the logs. It let out a sharp hiss. The others recoiled slightly, their chittering dropping in pitch, becoming wary. They avoided that corner, giving the crumbling stone wall a wide berth, almost. Respectfully, fearfully, Ben slowly directed his flashlight beam towards the corner. The wall was covered in crude carvings, ancient and weathered. Spirals, concentric circles, jagged lines depicting towering angular figures that looked disturbingly like the creatures below. And etched deeply into the stone itself was a large symbol, a spiral enclosed within a circle, crossed by a single vertical line. The rock ... I whispered, realization dawning. They don't like the rock? The carvings? As if confirming my thought, the lead creature let out a guttural command. The others ceased their search. They backed out of the shattered doorway, there, movements swift and silent. Within moments, they were gone, melting back into the forest like shadows retreating before dawn. The chittering faded, replaced by an eerie, heavy silence. We waited, trembling, for what felt like hours. The first gray light of dawn began to seep through the broken roof. Below, the cabin was empty except for splintered wood and dust motes. Dancing in the pale light, the creatures had truly left. Why? Maya asked, her voice raw. Why did they leave? Because of the carvings? Because of the rock itself, maybe, Ben said, cautiously descending the ladder. He approached the carved wall, running a hand over the spiral symbol. This stone feels different, colder, older. He looked towards the gaping doorway. They didn't just chase us. They drove us here, to this place. The implications were chilling. We hadn't just stumbled into their territory. We'd been deliberately herded to this ancient, marked place. Why? A warning? A sacrifice? The carvings. Here's the horror story in 3 chapters, told from your perspective as the narrator, without asterisk symbols. The air in the pine ridge. Forest was thick with the scent of damp earth and pine needles as we set up camp. Jake, Mark, and I. 3 friends chasing the thrill of wilderness and challenging cliffs. We'd planned this weekend for months, hiking deep into the reserve and tackling Black Rock Summit. The first day was perfect sunshine and easy trails, filled with laughter, and Jake's terrible jokes. But as dusk bled into night, the forest changed. A comforting chorus of crickets faded, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed against our ears. Our campfire, once cheerful, cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to reach for us beyond the circle of light. That's when the whispers started, faint like dry leaves skittering over rock, coming from the impenetrable darkness just beyond the fire's glow. We tried to laugh it off. Wind in the pines, maybe a small animal, probably just squirrels having a midnight argument. Jake chuckled, but his eyes kept darting towards the trees. Mark, usually the stoic one, shifted uncomfortably. Sounded closer than that, he muttered, poking the fire with unnecessary force. Then we heard it clearly. Not a whisper, but a voice. Low, guttural, utterly alien, yet chillingly close. It didn't form words, just a series of wet clicks and rasps that seemed to crawl up my spine. We froze, the fire's crackle suddenly, loud in the silence that followed. The air turned icy cold, despite the flames. Jake's hand tightened on his flashlight. Mark's face was pale in the firelight. The feeling of being watched, intensely and maliciously, became a physical weight on my shoulders. The vast, dark woods no longer felt adventurous. They felt like a cage and something was inside it with us. Dawn brought little comfort. The mist clung to the trees like cobwebs, muting colors and sounds. The plan was to climb Black Rock, but the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken dread. Still, we pressed on, hoping the exertion and sunlight would dispel the lingering fear. The climb started well enough, the familiar strain of muscles and focus on handholds a welcome distraction. But the higher we went, the thicker the mist became, swirling around us like cold, damp fingers. Halfway up a challenging pitch, Mark, climbing just below me, let out a sharp gasp. I looked down. His face was a mask of pure terror, staring not at the rock face, but out into the swirling gray nothingness beside us. "There," he hissed, voice trembling. "Something moving in the mist. Fast." Jake above us called down. "What is it? Rockfall?" "No," Mark choked out. "Not rock. Something else." Skittering. We saw nothing but fog, but Mark's terror was contagious. The feeling of exposure on the rock face was overwhelming. We hurried the rest of the climb in tense silence, the mist playing tricks on our eyes, every shadow morphing into something menacing. We reached the summit plateau, a barren expanse of rock shrouded in fog. Relief was short-lived. Our phones, fully charged the night before, were dead. Jake's GPS watch flickered erratically before dying completely. We were isolated, cut off, perched on an island of stone in a sea of gray. The descent was a nightmare of imagined sounds and shapes in the mist. We practically ran back to camp, the whispers seeming to follow us down the mountain. Exhausted and shaken, we retreated to our tents early. Sleep was impossible. I lay rigid in my sleeping bag, every rustle of the tent fabric sounding like claws. Then, around midnight, the zip of my tent door slowly started to slide open. I held my breath, paralyzed. Outside, silhouetted against the faint moonlight filtering through the trees, stood Mark. But his posture was all wrong, hunched, unnatural. And when he spoke, his voice was a grotesque parody, dripping with a malice that froze my blood. "Cold out here," it rasped, using Mark's vocal cords, but twisting the words into something inhuman. "Let me in." But the worst part, the part that made my heart stop, were the eyes reflecting the dim light from my headlamp inside the tent. Not Mark's familiar hazel, but two bottomless pits of pure, oily blackness. I scrambled back, fumbling for my knife, a strangled cry escaping my throat. The figure outside tilted its head at an impossible angle, emitting a low, gurgling chuckle before the tent flap fell shut. I spent the rest of the night clutching my knife, listening to soft, shuffling footsteps circling the next morning. Mark was gone. Not gone as in packed up and left. Gone as in vanished. His tent was shredded from the inside, fabric hanging in tattered strips. His backpack lay spilled open, contents strewn about like garbage. There were no signs of a struggle, just destruction. And deep, unnatural gouges scored the earth around his tent site, tracks that looked disturbingly like massive, clawed fingers had dragged something heavy away into the undergrowth. Panic, cold and absolute, seized us. Jake and I didn't need words. We broke camp in a frenzy, abandoning anything non-essential. The forest, once merely intimidating, now felt actively hostile. Every branch snapping underfoot sounded like a gunshot. Every bird call sounded like a distorted mimicry of Mark's voice. We moved as fast as we could, the map Jake had memorized. Our only guide, our eyes constantly scanning the dense foliage, expecting those black eyes to appear at any moment. We tried to stay on the trail, but the deeper we went, the more the path seemed to twist and turn on itself, leading us past the same gnarled oak tree 3 times. The whispers returned, louder now, swirling around us from multiple directions, sometimes forming mangled versions of our names. Ja-Ek, narrator. The voice shifted, sometimes guttural, sometimes a chillingly perfect imitation of Mark's tone, pleading for help from somewhere unseen. "Guys, over here! Help me, please! Don't listen!" Jake yelled, his voice raw with fear. "It's not him! Just run!" We ran blindly, branches whipping at our faces. The light was fading again, plunging the forest into premature twilight. That's when we heard the heavy, rhythmic thumping behind us, shaking the ground. Asterisk thump, drag, thump, drag, asterisk, accompanied by wet, tearing sounds and that same guttural clicking. We didn't dare look back. We stumbled into a small, rocky clearing as darkness finally swallowed the forest. A narrow fissure in the rock face offered, the only shelter, barely large enough for both of us to squeeze into, backs pressed against cold stone. We huddled there, breath ragged, hearts pounding against our ribs. Outside, the heavy footsteps stopped. The tearing sound ceased. The forest held its breath. Then a shadow blocked the faint moonlight at the fissure entrance. It didn't speak. It just stood there, radiating a palpable sense of wrongness and predatory hunger. We could hear its ragged, wet-breathing smell, the coppery tang of blood and something deeply rotten. Jake gripped my arm, his fingers digging in painfully. We pressed ourselves deeper into the fissure, the cold rock our only shield. The silence stretched, agonizing. Was it waiting? Listening? Could it smell our fear? We didn't move. We didn't breathe. We just waited in the suffocating darkness, trapped between the stone and the thing wearing Mark's face, knowing Dawn was still hours away, and that the mimic knew exactly where we were hiding. The only sound was the frantic hammering of our own hearts, and the soft, wet scrape of something sharp, slowly dragging against the rock face outside our hiding place. Hunt wasn't over. It was just beginning. The crunch of gravel beneath my tires faded as I pulled into the secluded black spruce campground. Towering pines, ancient and dark, pressed in on the narrow access road, filtering the late afternoon sun into long, gloomy shadows. The air, sharp, with the scent of pine resin and damp earth, felt heavy, silent, too silent. No birdsong, no chatter from other campers. I was utterly alone. Parking beside the designated fire pit, I wrestled my tent onto the uneven ground. The silence wasn't peaceful. It felt watchful. As I hammered the last tent peg, a sound prickled the hairs on my neck. A low, rhythmic thump. Thump, thump like something heavy and soft being dragged through the underbrush, deep within the wall of trees encircling the clearing. It stopped. As suddenly as it began, I stood frozen, hammer in hand, scanning the darkening woods. Nothing moved but the swaying branches high above. Just the wind, I told myself firmly. Just the old trees groaning. Night fell swiftly in the mountains, swallowing. The world in an inky blackness broken only by the feeble circle of light from my headlamp and the crackling fire I'd managed to build. The flames danced, casting monstrous, shifting shapes on the surrounding trees. The earlier silence was gone, replaced by a chorus of night insects and the mournful sigh of the wind through the spruce needles. Yet, beneath it all, the feeling of being watched intensified. I tried reading, but the words blurred. Every snap of a twig outside the firelight made me jump. Every rustle in the bush sounded deliberate. Then, while adding a log, I saw it. Just beyond the ring of firelight, between two gnarled pines, stood a figure. Tall, impossibly thin, and unnaturally still. It was shrouded in deep shadow, featureless, but I felt its gaze like a physical weight, cold and predatory. My breath hitched. I slowly reached for the heavy flashlight beside me. When I looked back, beam ready, the space between the pines was empty. Only darkness stared back. Had I imagined it? The crawling dread in my stomach insisted I hadn't. Asterisk, asterisk, chapter 3. The thing at sleep was impossible. I lay rigid in my sleeping bag inside the tent, every nerve screaming. The forest sounds seemed to mock me, amplifying every creak and whisper. Then a new sound sliced through the night. A slow, deliberate scrape, scrape along. A taut nylon wall of the tent, right beside my head, like long, ragged fingernails being dragged across the fabric. My blood turned to ice. I held my breath, heart hammering against my ribs. The scraping stopped. Silence. Then a low, guttural clicking bang, right outside the tent flap. It sounded wet, labored, like stones grinding together in a throat not meant for speech. The clicking grew closer, moving around the small tent. It paused directly outside the zippered door. I could hear a faint, ragged breathing now, a smell like damp earth, and something rancid seeping through the tent fabric. Something was standing right outside, waiting. I fumbled for my knife, my hand slick with sweat, knowing it would be useless against whatever made that sound. Asterisk, asterisk, chapter 4. The run and the thick clicking stopped. The breathing stopped. The silence was even more terrifying than the sounds. Had it gone? Or was it listening? I couldn't stay. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. I had to run. Now, in one frantic motion, I grabbed my keys, unzipped the tent door just enough to squeeze out, and bolted into the suffocating darkness, not daring to look back. Branches whipped my face, roots snagged my feet, but I ran blindly, driven by primal terror, away from the campsite, away from the tent, deeper into the oppressive woods. My headlong flight ended when I tripped and sprawled into a small, unnaturally cold clearing. Moonlight, weak and gray, filtered down as I pushed myself up, gasping. I saw it. Not behind me. Butte ahead it stood at the far edge of the clearing. No. Longer shrouded. Moonlight glistened on slick, grayish skin, stretched taut over a skeletal frame too tall, limbs too long, and jointed wrong. It had no face, just deep, shadowed hollows where eyes should be, and a ragged slit below that might have been a mouth. It didn't move towards me. It simply raised one impossibly long, clawed finger and pointed. Not at me, but past me, back towards the direction of my campsite. A choked sob escaped me. I scrambled backwards, then turned and ran again, not towards my car, but parallel, desperate to put distance between me and that thing. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, collapsing behind a massive fallen log. I huddled there, trembling, listening. Only the wind and my own ragged breaths. Dawn found me there, cold and broken. I never went back for my tent, my supplies, or the car parked conspicuously alone. I just stumbled down the mountain road until I hitched a ride, the silence of the woods replaced by a new, permanent silence inside me. Sometimes in the quietest hours, I still hear the clicking, and I wonder what it wanted me to see back at. The campsite. The rangers found my abandoned car weeks later. They also found my journal near the cold fire pit. The last entry simply read, "It watches from the trees. It knows I'm here. It's coming closer."